Behind the unprecedented court review of Maharashtra Slums Act, Bombay High Court last month began a first of a kind review of the Maharashtra Slum Areas Improvement, Clearance and Redevelopment Act 1971. While the judiciary typically tests the constitutional validity of laws, this exercise goes a step further, aiming to identify gaps in the 1971 Act. The review was ordered by a Supreme Court bench of Justices P.S. Narasimha and Arvind Kumar last July. The 1971 Act deals with the identification and clearance of slums areas. It has played a key role in shaping Mumbai's vertical growth. However, slum redevelopment projects have been plagued by unconscionable delays, which courts have said are violative of the fundamental rights of slum dwellers. In Mumbai, where real estate prices are among the highest in the country, slum redevelopment is as much as about profit as it is about housing the urban poor or improving the living conditions in the city. Developers benefit from various incentives under the redevelopment laws and schemes. Bombay High Court last month began a first of a kind review of Maharashtra's slum areas Improvement, Clearance and Redevelopment Act 1971. The 1971 Act empowers the Maharashtra government to designate land as a slum area and acquire it if needed. A statutory body, Slum Rehabilitation Authority, oversees the rehabilitation of this land and can entrust its redevelopment to any agency or developer. The Maharashtra Slum Rehabilitation Scheme was introduced in 1995 to protect slum dwellers from eviction. Private developers are required to provide slum dwellers with finished tenements for free on a portion of the acquired land. The developers can keep the rest of the land for the open market. Over the years, redevelopment projects have been plagued by delays. The judiciary has now undertaken a review of the law. The Yash Developers case. The case that triggered the review involves a 2003 project in Borivali allotted to Yash Developers. The developer's contract was terminated by Apex Grievance Redressal Committee in 2021. Yash Developers moved to Bombay High Court when the project was handed over to another developer. In 2022, Justice Girish S. Kulkarni upheld AGRC's developer decision, noting that 199 slum dwellers have been kept waiting for years without being paid transit rent. This court said was completely opposed to spirit and ethos of a slum scheme. Yes, developers then moved to Supreme Court but failed to get relief. The top court noted that repeated judicial interventions following delays had failed to bring about any course correction from the SRA or developers. Citing data from the National Judicial Data Grid, Supreme Court said 1,600 cases involving disputes under the 1971 Act were pending before the Bombay High Court, including 135 that were more than a decade old. It is in this context that Supreme Court ordered the review of the 1971 Act. Execution of the project under the Slum Rehabilitation Scheme cannot be reviewed as a real estate development project. This is a public purpose there is a public purpose involved, the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court's decision expanded the court's power to that of a facilitator of access to justice and effective functioning of constitutional bodies. It also set a precedent for the court to review legislation without a cause of action, that is, when there is no affected party before the court. The only other instance when this happens is under Article 143, when the President can request Supreme Court's opinion on a matter of public interest or a question of law. Article 143, when the President can request Supreme Court's opinion on a matter of public interest or a question of law. Since a state law was involved, the Supreme Court directed the Chief Justice of Bombay High Court to constitute a bench to initiate suo motu proceedings for reviewing the working of a statute to identify the cause of the problems discussed in the ruling. It also asked the High Court to consider directing the government to constitute a committee performance audit of the 1971 Act. Supreme Court identified 6 key areas that needed review: identification and declaration of land as a slum. The Supreme Court said that insidious intervention of builders cast doubts on the independence and integrity of the decision making process. Identification of slum dwellers. The Supreme Court said that ascertaining who is a slum dweller is complicated and completing claims lead to lots of litigation. Selection of a developer. The Supreme Court said that law leaves the decision to the slum dweller cooperative societies who are often manipulated by competitive and rival developers. Appointment of land for redevelopment and sale. Developers seek to increase the proportion of saleable area which is contested by slum dwellers, Supreme Court said. Obligation to provide transit accommodation for slum dwellers. Supreme Court noted various instances of slum dwellers refusing to vacate their residences because the accommodation provided to them was inconvenient or the rent offered was insufficient. Lack of independence, objectivity in functioning of statutory authorities. The functioning of these statutory authorities gives an indication that there could be a regulatory capture. A special bench of the Justice Girish Kulkarni began detailed hearings on February 14. The next hearing is scheduled for March 18. Why US aid matters to Ukraine. The Donald Trump administration has suspended all American aid to Ukraine. How is it likely to impact the war? Can Ukraine continue to hold out against the Russians without US military and financial aid? Days after the White House showdown between Vladimir Zelensky and Donald Trump and JD Vance, the United States has suspended all military aid to Ukraine. On Monday, Trump attacked Zelensky's statement that an agreement to end the war is still very, very far away and as the worst that could have been made, and said America will not put up with it for much longer. Since Russia's invasion began 3 years ago, the US, alongside Europe, had been Ukraine's biggest provider of aid, including weapon systems, equipment, and financial support. In his address to his people on Monday, Zelensky said the government was working on all possible scenarios to protect the Ukraine. What could the suspension of US aid mean? Such action was always on the cards after President Trump's verbal clash with President Zelensky in Oval Office on February 28. Trump and Vice President JD Vance had berated the Ukrainian leader for not being adequately thankful for American aid. Charles Kupchan, a director with the US National Security Council under President Barack Obama, told the BBC that the pausing of aid is bold arm twisting coercive diplomacy from the White House, telling Zelensky that if he wants American weapons, he will have to negotiate with Russia. After their summit in London on Sunday, European leaders suggested they could not guarantee peace in Ukraine without US help, according to Washington based non-profit US Global Leadership Coalition. European allies and partner countries now account for more than 47% of global aid to Ukraine. US assistance accounts for almost 40%, but its share in military aid could be higher. US military support covers everything from anti-tank Javelin missiles to long-range strike missiles and air defense capabilities. Heavy weapon tanks include tanks, munitions, artillery shells, and air defense missiles. Supplies and provisions include medical equipment, ambulances, and cold weather gear. Around a dozen of high-mobility artillery rocket system HIMARS, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, light multiple rocket launchers supplied last year, boosted Ukraine firepower. National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missiles, contracted in 2022, are slated to be delivered soon. US has been training Ukrainian soldiers in Europe, and the US has been providing a lot of intelligence support, which is especially important for Ukrainian military defense maneuvers on the eastern flank. Elon Musk's Starlink project has been instrumental in keeping parts of the Ukraine connected to the communications grid. All this aid has been key to helping Ukrainian forces take on and in many areas repel the Russian military. Europe has committed to backing Ukraine, but Kiev needs a steady flow of American weapons, munitions, and supplies to continue the war. According to the policy research think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies, all military aid funds announced by the Joe Biden administration have been committed and the equipment is currently at variance. The estimated deliveries of the US military equipment to Ukraine, so $306 million in March 24, it went up to $1,800 million in 2023. Cumulative accumulated military aid from US and other donors $67 billion, United States, and $66 billion from Europe, Canada, and Australia. 28% is committed, $28 billion is committed, $34 billion is obligated. According to the policy research think tank, all military fund aids announced by the Joe Biden administration have been committed and the equipment is currently at various stages of the delivery pipeline. Congress has appropriated $86 billion for Ukraine military aid in five supplemental appropriations and the development of defense base budget. The last aid package was passed in April 24. The Trump administration is unlikely to request more. The equipment is being flowing by three main routes: Presidential Drawdown Authority, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, and foreign military financing. Presidential Drawdown Authority and Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative account for 90% of the US funding. The Department of Defense has committed all PDA and USAI funds, but not all funds have been dispensed yet. What is left could face varying degrees of restrictions now, and aid takes some time to be delivered on the ground. A lot is still in the pipeline. According to CSIS, some systems have shipped quickly for HIMARS, high mobility artillery rocket systems for high mobility artillery rocket system for HIMARS that were announced in early June 2022 arrived in Ukraine later that month. Others, such as Patriot missile systems, took longer, with a December 22 commitment to draw down. The first units delivered only in April 23. This is not the first time that Trump has used a squeeze on US aid to exert pressure on Zelensky. During his first term in the White House, Trump has held up congressionally authorized assistance to Ukraine in an attempt to force Zelensky to furnish details of alleged corruption involving Joe Biden's son Hunter. Zelensky had refused to toe the line then. At roughly $1.8 billion per month, European military aid assistance has been comparable to that from the US, according to calculations by Germany's Kiel Institute. Aid from Europe was especially critical in late 23 and 24 as Congress debated the next US aid package. Europe had then approved using frozen Russian sovereign assets to support Ukraine's military needs. According to CSIS, however, the Europeans are already supplying as much as they possibly can, and if the US ceases aid, many countries that are already up to capacity in terms of utilizing their military production will likely scale back. Russian Russia, on the other hand, has ramped up domestic production of military supplies and is securing weapons through countries such as North Korea and Belarus. Delimitation of constituencies, the primer on the exercise and the process. Home Minister Amit Shah assured southern states last week that they wouldn't lose even a single seat after a fresh delimitation of constituencies. It was an attempt to address concerns, especially in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, about the potential loss of parliamentary representation if the exercise is based only on population data. The 2021 census, which was delayed by COVID-19 pandemic, is expected to begin this year and will be followed by the delimitation of constituencies. The Constitution 84th Amendment Act 2002 froze existing constituency boundaries until the first census after the year 2026. The delimitation of constituencies represents the constitutional commitment to a fair and representative electoral framework and equitable representation of citizens in elected bodies. The number of constituencies in parliament and state assemblies is adjusted according to the latest population figure to ensure that number of Indians represented by an MP and MLA remains roughly the same principle of one citizen, one vote. Article 82 says that upon the completion of each census, allocation of seats in the House of People and States and the division of each state into territorial constituencies shall be adjusted by such authority and in such manner as Parliament may determine. Article 170 Clause 3 provides for readjustment upon the completion of each census of total number of seats in the Legislative Assembly of each state and the division of each state into territorial constituencies. Following the 1951 Census Delimitation Commission Act of 1952 created the first delimitation commission to draw the boundaries of Lok Sabha and state assembly constituencies. These boundaries have been subsequently redrawn thrice by delimitation commissions in 1962, 72 and 2002. The most recent delimitation redrew some constituency boundaries on the basis of 2001 census. However, the number of Lok Sabha seats allocation for each state and the number of seats in state assemblies have been remained unchanged since the delimitation of 1972. Based on census of 1971, the number of Lok Sabha seats was fixed at 543, which meant each MP represented roughly million Indians. The number of Lok Sabha seats was earlier fixed at 494 and 522 after the census of 1951 and 61 respectively. Constitution 42nd Amendment Act 1976 passed passed by the government of the emergency focused on efforts to control India's population froze the number of Lok Sabha seats until the first census after 2000, and in 2002 Atal Bihari Vajpayee government extended the freeze until at least 2026. The president appointed a delimitation commission headed by a retired judge of the Supreme Court and comprising the chief election commissioner or his representative and state election commissioners. In addition, associate co-opted members are appointed for each state or union territory undergoing delimitation. These members are sitting MPs appointed by the Speaker of Lok Sabha and MLAs appointed by the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly concerned. Associate members provide inputs and advice but do not have decision-making powers. Decision powers or right to vote. Decision-making powers or right to vote. If voting is required on any issue. Commission operates independently of the government and the revised boundaries drawn by it cannot be challenged in court. Census data serves as the main basis of delimitation. This is at the heart of the apprehensions of southern states who fear that the failure of North India's Indian states at controlling their population could be rewarded by increasing representation in parliament, while the South is punished for its success. In this scenario, BJP's domination of the North could in theory lead to the South, where the BJP does not have a strong presence except in Karnataka, becoming irrelevant in national politics. Census data also serve as the crucial guide for redrawing electoral boundaries, taking into account geographical contiguity, population density and socio-economic realities. In particular, the data help to identify regions with significant caste, scheduled tribe populations and ensure that seats are reserved in population to share of SC/ST population. However, since Dalit populations are scattered, SC seats are reserved based both on concentration of the SC population and the spread of these seats across various regions of the state. Following the creation of a proposed borders, the Delimitation Commission releases its recommendation and invites feedback from the general public, political parties, and other stakeholders. Delimitation plan is finalized after making the necessary revisions. Once published, in the official gazette, Commission's order take effect in the next election. Why Space Agency wants to make most of the solar maximum? NASA will launch the latest solar mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base on March 6. The mission, known as the Polarimeter Punch mission, Polarimeter to unify the corona and heliosphere, will be the third major mission to lift off in past 18 months. The launch of so many back-to-back solar missions is no coincidence. The reason has to do with solar cycle. Like a bar magnet, Sun also has a magnetic field with north and south poles. The magnetic field exerts due to constant movement of electrically charged particles within the Sun. Every 11 years or so, Sun's magnetic field flips completely, meaning its north and south poles switch plane. This period is known as solar cycle. Solar cycle affects activity on the surface of the Sun. For instance, Sun is at the most active when the magnetic field flips. This phase is called solar maximum. During this phase, our star can send out more frequent and intense bursts of radiation and particles into the space. After the flip, Sun calms down until it reaches the solar minimum and a new cycle begins. During the solar maximum, the Sun's surface has its largest number of sunspots, small dark cooler areas where the magnetic field is particularly strong. During the solar minimum, Sun has least sunspots. Scientists track the solar cycle by counting the number of sunspots. Giant eruptions on the Sun, such as solar flares and coronal mass ejections, also increase during the solar cycle. These eruptions send powerful bursts of energy and material into space, according to a report on the NASA website. The bursts are significant as they can have impact on Earth, they can disrupt the satellite communication and even affect electricity grids on the planet. That is the reason why scientists keep a tab on the solar cycle. The present solar activity and number of sunspots suggest that the cycle may be nearing its maximum, although the official confirmation is yet to be made. Due to increase in activity, solar maximum is the best possible window available for physicists to both launch missions and observe the Sun. This is why there have been a rise in the number of missions to observe the star. Physicists are aware that if they miss this window, the next possible intense solar activity will not be before 2035-36. Since 2023, solar missions in India and Europe Space Agency have been launched. Aditya L1 by ISRO in September 2, 2023. ISRO launched Aditya L1, the country's first solar mission. The mission is designed to study solar flares and solar winds, a continuous stream of charged particles, and measure low intensity magnetic fields. Proba 3 mission by the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency launched Proba 3 mission on December 4, 2024. It has a unique design to study solar winds and solar storms. Punch by NASA. Punch is the first of its kind solar mission that will study the Sun's solar corona, the outermost layer. Four identical suitcase-sized satellites will continue image the Sun's inner corona and provide information on the origin of solar flares. Aditya L1 Proba 3 December 4, 2024 Punch by NASA. So that's all in this one. See you in the next.